About 1 month away from the start of the 89th Texas legislative session, and tensions are running high between state Republicans, with the state GOP saying it may target some Republican House members who go against the caucus pick for Speaker of the House. Joining us now to talk more about this is Dr. Joshua Blank with the Texas Politics Project. Dr. Blank, thank you for taking time to talk with us.
Thanks for having me.
So it seems like there was already a lot of tension about this House race between David Cook and Dustin Burrows. Talk to us, get us caught up on exactly what happened.
Yeah, well, ultimately, the current Speaker of the House, Representative Dade Phelan, recently dropped out of the race for Speaker after realizing that he was not going to be able to get enough votes necessary to retain the speakership. He was already facing a challenge from Representative Cook, and with Phelan dropping out of the race, Representative Burrows jumped in at the last minute. Ultimately, this is the continuation of what has been a years-long, if not multi-year fight within the Texas Republican Party about who is going to have control over the agenda and who ultimately is going to lead the Texas House.
Yeah, and so what we saw at the behind closed door meeting is you had 2 votes and a group of supporters of Representative Burrows walked out, and then that sort of allowed Representative Cook to win the vote, to win the caucus pick. And the Texas GOP has said when time comes, when the legislative session starts and the vote happens for Speaker of the House, if members don't vote for Representative Cook, that they want to censor members of the House.
Yeah, this raises a really interesting and potentially problematic situation. The rules for the Republican caucus in the Texas House state that if a member receives a supermajority of the vote of the caucus, then they shall be supported by the entire caucus when the vote happens in the legislature for the Speaker. That's a vote that takes place among Democrats and Republicans, and this is a way to enforce a certain amount of party fealty among Republicans. The issue here is that the Republican caucus has no way to enforce these rules. So in is stepping the Republican Party, the state party apparatus, saying, if we can enforce those caucus rules by essentially prohibiting House members who don't vote with the caucus from participating in Republican primaries. Ultimately, this is an unusual situation because normally the party acts to support elected officials, not to keep them from their electorate.
So I think there are people at home who go, wait a minute. How can the state Republican Party stop people from running for office, in the primary?
Well, I think that's a very good question. And I think what you'd find is that the state Republican Party isn't entirely sure whether it's able to do this itself, because right after the rule that's passed by the party that would allow it to prohibit members from running in their primaries, it also says that it will cover the legal expenses of anybody who implements this, which indicates that they know that it's likely that this is not something that the state or U.S. constitutions will allow, although it's not necessarily clear that it doesn't.
What does this say about the bigger infighting that's happening among Republicans in Texas right now?
Yeah, this is an ongoing story. And what you have is that you have a party that's been in power for the better part of the last 2 decades. And what that means in a lot of ways is that with sort of all this success ultimately comes conflict. Because what this is really about who is going to set the Republican agenda. Is it going to be Greg Abbott? Is it going to be Dan Patrick? Is it going to be the Speaker of the Texas House, or is it going to be outside groups? And all of those players at this point are trying to put their thumb on the scale and essentially create a situation in which they're going to get more of what they want when the session finally ends.
Have you seen something like this happen before? I know I've not seen anything like this level of fighting within the Republican Party or within, Texas politics. So what about you, though? What have you seen?
Yeah, I think what we've seen starting, even last year during the Republican primaries when Governor Abbott weighed in on a number of Republican primaries and endorsed against incumbent Republicans, that was the beginning of uncharted territory. So while the infighting has been constant, while the name calling is just part of politics, what is unusual is seeing state actors using, again, party resources and candidate resources to really, spend more effort going after their own than going after the opposing party. And that is really what, Texas politics is looking like at the moment.
Yeah, going to be interesting to see how it all shakes out this January when the session gets underway. Dr. Blank, we thank you so much for taking some time out to talk with us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.